Straight up. Everyone's losing their fucking minds. That's what it's. God, America is disgusting.
Quickly. On February 24th, 2022, just after 2 a.m. Ukraine time, Vladimir Putin, the autocrat of Russia, announced in a pre-recorded TV address a, quote, special military operation in Ukraine.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
To the rest of the world, that meant war.
No, what we should do is literally fucking ban, and even fuck banning, just jail anyone that is not towing the line, okay? Is not towing the line, no matter what it is, even if it's like war between two other nations, but we have a stake in the war. Like, that's the appropriate thing to do. By the way, I fucking despise every motherfucker that does shit like this, okay? It's so stupid, it's so fucked up, it's so insane. Someone said, like with Israel, Pepela, are you fucking kidding me? I've never petitioned for someone to be banned for saying pro-Israel shit. If anything, the exact opposite happens. Whenever people are heterodox or even speak out against Israel, it doesn't even matter if they're of a Jewish background. It doesn't even matter if their fucking parents were literally murdered in the Holocaust, okay? Their immediate family members were murdered in the Holocaust. They still get fucking blacklisted. And the people that are engaging in that blacklisting are people like fucking Dershowitz, who literally has defended and is known as a friend to one of the most prolific pedophiles on the fucking planet, a child sex trafficker, Jeffrey Epstein. There are literal laws in like 30 states in the United States of America that say that if you have ever participated in a boycott, divestment, and sanction movement against the state of Israel, okay, that means you cannot work with the state government. Get the fuck out of here, man. Holy shit. There are literal organizations, NGOs, called the Canary Mission, for example, that specifically and actively work to fire anyone and everyone that has ever said anything that they consider to be anti-Semitic, that they consider to be anti-Zionist, okay? They literally are like, oh, this person has said anti-American shit, this person has said anti-Zionist shit, that means they're anti-Semitic, that means they're unpatriotic, that person should be fired. And they actively do fire people as a consequence of that. It is grotesque.
War. Within minutes, the shelling started, the skies lit up, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine had begun.
The tangent off this, how do you explain to someone that anti-Zionist rhetoric is different from anti-Semitic rhetoric? I don't know. Do you hate all fucking Muslims if you criticize the Saudi Arabia's ongoing genocide in Yemen? No one thinks like that, right? That would be unfathomable. That would be the most insane thing that anyone could ever fucking say, right? And that's it. All Jews do not belong to Israel, okay? The interests of Jews around the world do not always align with the interests of Israel. That, in and of itself, is unironically an anti-Semitic take, claiming that all Jews are a monolith and claiming that the Israeli project, especially in the way that it is fucking currently being done, okay, is at the behest of every single Jew, and that all Jews have a loyalty to Israel is literally anti-Semitic. But when Israelis say that, or when hyper-Zionists, hyper-nationalists say that, that's considered to be the norm and normal take. But you hear it from Nazis and the hyper-Zionists alike. Does that not make you question that a little bit? Does that not come across as weird? It's insane. It's absolutely preposterous. Anyway, let's continue.
To many Ukrainians, though, this was perceived not as a beginning, but a continuation of the conflict that began some 8 years prior in the spring of 2014. Ever since Russia and the rebels it backed overtook Crimea and swaths of eastern Ukraine, the country has maintained an enlarged and active military presence along Ukraine's borders. In 2017, for example, Russia re-established the famed but disbanded 8th Combined Arms Army here in Novocherkassk. Revived under the pretense that it was a defensive decision, the 8th Combined Army has since grown, adding artillery, missile subunits, and even, some analysts believe, incorporating separatists into its own ranks. This is hardly an isolated development. From Sevastopol on the southern tip of Crimea to Klintsy along Ukraine's northern border, Russian bases, staging points, and general military infrastructure have grown to increasingly surround Ukraine since 2014. This extension of military might was made possible by the physical seizure of the land and, in the eyes of Russian leadership, justified by the threat that Ukraine could retaliate or try to seize back occupied territories. This extension has also, in turn, quite literally paved the path for Russia to amass an extraordinary 75% of their principal combat units within striking distance of Ukraine. On Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry announced that 90,000 Russian troops had encircled the country's borders and occupied territories. The Russian forces that were in the region for supposed exercises simply weren't leaving. Not only were they not going away, but as the next few months would reveal, their numbers were growing. This is a satellite image from outside the western Russian town of Yena in September, and this is the exact same spot on November 1st. From an empty field and a dirt road to the staging area for the Russian 41st Combined Army, normally headquartered some 2,000 miles or 3,000 kilometers away, suddenly sat north of 1,200 tanks, howitzers, towed artillery, and support vehicles. And November only marked the beginning.
Part of the reason why I got this wrong when I said Putin will not invade, despite all of this information that showed that he would, was because this type of staging had been done time and time again since 2014 as routine military exercises, okay? That's why, along with the reasons why Vladimir Putin is getting his shit pushed in many different ways by the rest of the global economy, sanctioning it, and also the Ukrainian forces that haven't even gotten to the insurgency part yet, have been able to push back against the Russian invasion very adequately and successfully, was the reason why I thought it would not happen. It was the reason why Zelensky did not think it would happen. The reason why many Ukrainians did not think it would happen. Okay?
Satellite images and social media posts tracked soldiers and supplies pouring into southwest Russia across December. But what alarmed analysts most was the fact that along with the soldiers and supplies, there were medical units, hospital tents, and fuel reserves. The Russians were amassing the infrastructure for war. The likelihood that this was a simulation plummeted. In January, Russian forces rolled into Belarus for joint exercises. Weeks later, it was announced that the soldiers would stay. Established staging areas like Yena further expanded, while new ones popped up, forming an increasingly foreboding arc around Ukraine. Now, behind the scenes, what made this massive domestic mobilization of troops, weapons, and supplies possible was Russia's vast rail network. This rail network's extent—
Oh God, oh fuck, oh shit, think about that. Look at that again.
Was
Oh fuck, look at those rails. Look at those railways. Oh my God. Oh. Trains all around the goddamn country, baby. Oh. Sorry.
Russia's vast rail network. This rail network's extent, earning its status as the third largest in the world, is a byproduct of the country's size, sparsity, and the suspect nature of its road network. Meanwhile, the degree of state control, with the government owning some 20 of the country's 21,000 locomotives, is a legacy of the Soviet era. This control and extensiveness combined means that Russia's military is able to rely heavily on the rail network. It was trains that moved the troops, tanks, and trucks to and from Yena.
Okay, stop. Oh God, stop showing me this. I'm close, dude. I'm fucking close. Look at all those trains, dude. Look at all those beautiful tracks that are cutting through the land. Normally, I'd say borders are a scar on the face of our beautiful planet. Yet these fucking railways, they're showing something else. It's a beauty mark. Okay. God damn. Get me hot and heavy thinking about these fucking trains, dude. God damn. Moving big pieces of equipment. Ooh. with ease across hundreds, if not thousands of fucking miles. Oh, I'm bricked the fuck up right now, dude. Fuck. Making me forget that the top of the hour is here. 14 minutes in. Making me forget that you can avoid those ads. You want an ad-free broadcasting experience by subscribing. I believe that only shows the main lines too, not the branch networks. Fuck! There's more?
I can only coom so much.
Stop it! You could also avoid, if you don't have $5, you could also avoid the ad break for free with a Twitch Prime. Or if you're lucky, you get
Thanks,
gifted
brother.
a sub. Here's the 1 minute ad break now.
Into Kursk and across the Bryansk and Smolensk oblasts. Digital forensics have shown that it was also trains that moved supplies from eastern Russia all the way to Belarus. And it was largely thanks to these trains, or Russia's reliance on them, that outsiders were able to so precisely document the military buildup as dashcams filmed transiting tanks at rail crossings, videos which then ended up on TikTok and circulated the world over. Trains set the stage. In the first weeks of February, under a curtain of clouds, Yena emptied out. Its troops and supplies tracked south. As these Russian forces pushed ever nearer to the Ukrainian border, tanks appeared in Kursk, just a 140-mile or 220.
The people saying USA has the world's largest rail system. Yeah, unfortunately, it hasn't been updated. And one of the biggest problems is that inside of our cities, we have very little to no adequate public transportation. Even though I do love America's trains as well, I've been on them, specifically the one from San Diego to Los Angeles. Fucking dope, dude. What an experience. Oh my God, dude. It is such an incredible, wonderful experience to just be able to get into that big fucking train and just sit there and watch I don't know. I mean, going at 40 miles an hour, unfortunately, but, you know, still awesome.
20-kilometer drive from Kharkiv, while additional troops and trucks amassed near Gomel, Belarus.
Damn, look at that.
20 miles or 32 kilometers away from the border. Across 3.5 months, 175,000 Russian troops had stacked up all along Ukraine's border, ready to unleash death and destruction in the country they believed they were there to liberate. In the opening hours of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the invading force worked to cripple Ukraine's military infrastructure. Some of the first volleys of the conflict involved airstrikes on Ukrainian air bases in an effort to help.
Someone said Chinese hypertrains got me busting every day. Dude, are you kidding me? I would never lose social credit. If I was in China, dude, I would never, ever lose social credit, dude. I would have the best social credit nonstop because I know one of the things that you can lose if you have shitty social credit is access to the fucking high-speed rail system. My Lord, dude. Oh my God. I'd be like Xi Jinping. I'm picking up trash on the street. I'm bribing local officials, whoever the fuck is the creditor institution. I don't give a fuck.
Russia quickly gained air superiority without strong resistance. 11 were destroyed across the first day of hostilities. By noon, focus shifted from anticipatory defense to offense as dozens of Russian helicopters landed troops at Hostomel Airport mere miles from Kyiv. This was seemingly in an effort to create an air bridge, seizing control of the airport to allow planes to bring in more troops who would push out into Kyiv. An air-based supply line could assure a certain level of logistical support regardless of conditions on the ground between the border and Kyiv. However, also recognizing this, Ukraine tasked its 4th Rapid Reaction Brigade to retake the airport, which it successfully did by 8 p.m. Across the same day, as fighting reached the Chernobyl exclusion zone and troops poured in from every direction, work continued behind the front lines to support.
Bro, how the fuck did he? Damn, dude. He like went and got incredible amounts of footage from the Russian Ministry of Defense. Like I haven't seen all this stuff, and I've been monitoring the situation actively. Like except for that one guy who was shooting that manned rocket. Like half the stuff I have not seen.
support
It's
the
crazy.
continued invasion. In Brest, Belarus, Russian forces could be seen unloading supplies from rail cars and assembling into a convoy configuration facing south towards the war zone. In Koniki, near Belarus's closest point to Kyiv, satellite imagery captured a road that Russians converted into a helicopter base with an X marking each landing zone. To the east, in Russia itself, a field hospital could be seen ready to treat early casualties.
I don't know if we should trust anyone with this much access. What? Dude, he's literally getting it from Russian PR. Like the Russian Defense Ministry is releasing all this shit. And the other stuff is on Telegram. It's like public information.
Nearby, another makeshift facility home to artillery and rocket launchers used in the opening hours of the conflict stood ready for more. However, despite all the well-planned war infrastructure constructed around Ukraine, things inside the war zone were seemingly going less to plan. As the sun rose from a bloody night onto the second day of battle, Russian forces set their sights on Kyiv, the country's capital, home to its government and lauded leader Volodymyr Zelensky. Under the assumption that Russia's ultimate ambition was to install a puppet government, Kyiv was the grand prize for the invading force, and yet they only made it to the city's suburbs. Still there, they met fierce resistance and made little progress, turning the night that many feared would mark the capital's fall into but a night. As day 2 became 3, photos and videos emerged that started to paint a more cohesive picture. Russian tanks were running out of fuel and left abandoned.
There wasn't anything TOS there, but I was a little scared regardless. I wanted to be sure.
Strewn across the country. The invading troops were seen looting stores for food, potentially due to a lack of their own. Stories emerged of Russian forces asking Ukrainian civilians for supplies and directions, seemingly unaware of the average person's opinion on them in the country they were attempting to conquer. Across the board, as they approached the urban areas that could only be taken with the most tactful coordination, the Russian military was looking disorganized and disconnected. Just a few disparate forces tasked with going in, guns blazing, to induce a quick and easy surrender. Of course, that is not what came to fruition. The Ukrainian defense included a recognition of what the Russian offense seemingly missed: the importance of logistics. In the famous words of General John J. Pershing, quote, "Infantry wins battles, logistics wins wars." So, Ukraine went—
And this is where Wendover comes in. Mr. Cream his pants over. Wendover, it's time to bend over to talk about logistics, baby. He just, I love his channel. I love his approach to these sorts of things. He's just such a fucking weeb for trains, planes, and logistics in general. Awesome.
For Russia's logistics. On social media platforms adapted to organize the country's guerrilla-style defense, posts circulated stressing the value of destroying fuel trucks. Of course, if you stop the fuel trucks, you stop the tanks, and unlike tanks, fuel trucks are typically unarmored and can be destroyed with cheap, accessible bullets or Molotov cocktails.
Wait, he's not gonna say that fucking Molotov cocktails are the ones that effectively dismantled their resupply, right?
When the Russians started disguising their fuel trucks to look more like traditional transport trucks, posts and messages quickly followed, making the updated target profile clear. Ukrainian forces also destroyed 2 key bridges into Kyiv, allowing them to focus on defending a smaller number of choke points, and similar tactics were used elsewhere in the country. The Ukrainian military also destroyed all connections between the Russian and Ukrainian rail networks to prevent the invading force from taking hold of them to ramp up their supply lines. Elsewhere, across the country, towns and cities dismantled their street signs, or in some cases, painted over them to read "Welcome to Hell," making it harder for Russian troops, many of which relied solely—
Okay, this part I don't, okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think like the entirety of the Russian military's like logistical operation was dismantled by Molotov cocktails and like road signs changing like they don't know how to fucking read a map. You know, like they don't know how to read a map. They have no way of like using. I mean, I don't believe that. I think that that's like a little bit. I think that that's a little bit on the propaganda side. That I thought there was going to be more information here. He didn't say entirely though. No, I think that that stuff is irrelevant. What's relevant is the Bayraktars, okay? Not to fucking juice up the Bayraktar a little bit too much. I'm not getting Turkish with it. It's just what is relevant, of course, is the 12 drones that Ukraine has been able to use. What's relevant is the Ukrainian air support that was not destroyed by the Russian military in the first fucking night when they were launching their special operations. And, you know, that's what was legitimately fucking destroying their refueling efforts, I think, rather than, you know, driving around and being like, oh, where is Ukraine?
Solely on paper maps to navigate around the country. Meanwhile, with the Russian military relying nearly entirely on analog, unsecured radio communications, amateur radio enthusiasts and hacktivist organizations like Anonymous worked to block and surveil enemy radio frequencies. Some even went further to broadcast pig sounds, thematic music, or written messages that would appear when analyzed on a spectrogram. Russia countered this with strategic disinformation, purportedly spreading this post listing fake frequencies across social media, but the Ukrainian side quickly caught on and spread the corrected frequencies across their means of communication. Now, to experts, the Russian military's logistics difficulties.
I don't think that this was this level of crowdsourcing was actually as disruptive. Maybe I'm wrong, but it does feel a little bit like it does feel a little bit like, yeah, we did it, Reddit, you know?
Were hardly surprising. In fact, they represented a historical through line. When analyzing the disastrous Soviet-Afghan War of the 1980s, poor logistics performance is an oft-cited reason for the USSR's failure to achieve its objectives. According to tacticians, their logistic support forces were inflexible and under-equipped, which left the fighting forces too under-equipped to perform their jobs. Of course, thanks to their vast railway network, which nearly entirely falls under state control, Russia's military has that incredible domestic mobilization capability. In fact, some 30,000 of their personnel serve in the Russian railway troops, whose task involves the defense, use, and construction of railways for military purposes. This force, larger than that of most countries, is indicative of just how crucial this one infrastructure asset is to their military machine. However, this domestic advantage, this reliance on
small arms and a Molotov will definitely take out fuel trucks. Yeah, but you need to have an organized operation. Untrained babushkas, you know, and like random Ukrainian people finding Russian fuel trucks and having Molotov cocktails on hand, readily available, is not the reason why you are going to be able to strategically destroy the resupply of an entire invading army.
the rails simultaneously represents an Achilles heel when conflicts take place beyond their borders. When war stretches past their furthest rail yards, Russian military logistics
I'm gonna have to watch this after.
At best mediocre.
Finally.
In the case of this invasion, the primary advanced rail yards being used are in Belarus and Russia itself, so for any further supply lines, especially any stretching into Ukraine, Russia had to resort to trucks. And simply put, Russia doesn't have enough trucks. Each of Russia's combined arms armies, the largest organizational unit.
There was literally footage of someone tossing Molotov out the window at a fuel truck and she got fire on her arm. I know, I did. We watched it on this broadcast. But do you think there's one Russian truck that is doing resupply? Or do you think there are hundreds of trucks that are doing it? Like, that's my point. There isn't enough. I don't think that the untrained, I don't think you really don't like Ukrainians defending themselves. Dude, I cannot understand how you can reach that conclusion. Like, I genuinely don't understand how you reach this conclusion at all. Okay? Like, this level of thinking and looking at anecdotes on the fucking ground is going to lead you to believe that, like, you know, Ukrainian farmers are successfully destroying the Russian military operation because you saw that video of one farmer plowing an artillery, and you saw a tractor pulling an artillery and another tractor pulling a fucking tank.
Unit of their ground forces is typically supported by one material technical support brigade, essentially their logistics support forces. Each of these brigades is composed of around 1,000 personnel operating 408 transport vehicles capable of hauling 1,870 tons of cargo. This, it turns out, is rather inadequate. According to retired US Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vershinin, a conflict modeling and simulations expert, Russia's forces, under their current configuration, are simply incapable of properly supporting a fight more than 90 miles or 145 kilometers from supply dumps, in this case, rail yards. And these assumptions were based on a 45-mile or 70-kilometer-per-hour average transport speed, which is likely only attained when territory is firmly within Russian control, something that proved elusive in the opening days of this invasion. A highly active conflict reliant on rocket artillery fire, which accurately describes this war, is even more resource-intensive on the logistics support forces, as each individual rocket requires a dedicated truck for transport to the launcher. With the frequency of artillery—
People have a set narrative of how things are going based on Reddit posts, and whenever you go against that narrative, they go ape shit. I'm not even entirely going against that narrative either. Like, I recognize that that Russia is taking an L, like truly, because they, I think, underestimated Ukrainian defenses. They underestimated the power of Javelin missiles and NATO weapons and surface-to-air missiles and the defense that Ukraine was able to, at the very least, launch towards protecting certain air bases so they can have some air defense, all that sort of stuff. I recognize. I'm just saying the extent of which we think Ukraine is winning the war versus Russia is. I mean, I don't know. I think that they are. I think that Russia is taking a way fucking a bigger L than they originally thought, logistically and militarily, but that still doesn't change the reality.
Artillery fire in the early days of the
I'm
invasion,
a little bit more skeptical
a large
of
chunk
it.
of Russia's material technical support brigade's capability was certainly tied up in supplying ammunition to launch sites. This general incapability seemingly reflects in Russia's strategy in Ukraine. Currently, the predominant characterization is that Russia believed that through a combination of dramatic airborne and land-based attacks in the opening hours and days of the invasion, the Ukrainians would quickly capitulate. They'd either surrender or Russian forces would quickly reach Kyiv, topple the government, and install a puppet government.
I think this part is adequate and true, by the way. Like Russia's underestimation of Ukrainian defenses and overestimation of its own logistical aptitude is certainly true. Demonstrably
that was
true.
Supported by nearly all independent analysts prior to the conflict's start.
Yeah.
Analysis suggests that when invading, Russia's forces can operate largely self-sufficiently without logistics support for about 3 to 5 days.
And I do agree. That assessment, I don't know. They might not have enough trucks, for the record. And I think that Wendo is probably correct. That military analyst guy is probably correct about like Russia's bare army and how hard it is for them to like adequately resupply their gigantic forces. I do agree. It's probably true. I don't know enough on that front. I was just taking an issue with saying that like Reddit, we did it. Reddit hacktivists are fucking hacking their frequencies and communications, or sending them astray by changing signs and stuff like that.
When the conflict did not conclude within that time frame, the Russians found themselves scrambling to regroup and resupply. Now, most Western forces, which are generally much better equipped from a logistics standpoint, operate on a pull-based system where fighting forces request resupplies as needed based on what actually occurs. Meanwhile, the Russian military operates predominantly on a push-based system where forces are resupplied on a more predictable basis as determined by leadership. This means that, in practice, there is more strategic decision-making and prioritization of which forces most need or warrant resupply, and which materials are most important to resupply.
Again, America's forces, look, guys, you want to know why? You want to know why American forces often don't run into the same logistical hurdles? Because they over-prepare, okay? Why? Because we don't have healthcare. Why? Because we don't have fucking free college. Why? Because we don't have any of those nice things that other countries, no matter how poor, no matter how starving, are working their very goddamn best to ensure for their own citizens, okay? And if you have a disagreement with that, I don't know what the fuck to tell you. The reason why we don't, the reason why we win wars, baby, even though we do end up losing wars, but at least while we're losing with fashion, is because we don't have fucking any of the nice things that we could have, okay? We can't afford those nice things because we're affording the other thing, the Lamborghini of militaries, okay? Which still ends up fucking losing after 20 years to a bunch of dudes wearing flip-flops in the desert.
So, in Ukraine, it's likely that ammunition was prioritized ahead of, say, fuel for tanks on less strategically important fronts. In the context of perpetual logistics limitations, as is the case for Russia's military, this is likely the more effective approach, but in the grand scheme of things, it's certainly less effective than the Western pull approach, which focuses on flexible logistics that adapt to real-world conditions. In short, Western forces let strategy lead logistics, while Russian forces let logistics lead strategy. The single factor that can best address these issues, however, is time. The Russian military does have the capabilities to set a war zone up for a more prolonged conflict. Its material technical support brigades include tactical pipeline battalions, for example, that can quickly construct networks in Ukraine to bring fuel and water closer to the active fronts without the need for burdensome supply convoys. Russia's railway troops can do the same with rail infrastructure, mending or constructing networks to support a long-term conflict or occupation. And the country can take—
How do you get mad over a Wendover Productions video? I'm not getting mad at Wendover Productions. I'm getting mad at the situation at hand. You know, imperialism, the final state of capitalism, is 100% alive and well. And, you know, we do that real well, but we do that at the cost of, at the opportunity cost of, like, killing our countrymen here for conditions of poverty that are completely avoidable in the wealthiest nation on the planet.
A page out of the Soviet playbook, leveraging the full might of the public and private sectors to support the military's operations. What the opening days of Russia's invasion of Ukraine have done, however, is exposed a weak point in the nation's military might, or perhaps demonstrated that the weak points of the Soviet military are still present. Logistics capabilities are arguably one major strategic advantage of many Western militaries, especially the US's, whose global network of military bases and massive sea and airlift capabilities allow it to properly supply conflict truly anywhere on Earth. For Russia to have failed so visibly mere miles from its border exposes its Achilles heel to any future adversary. Tragically, however, these early struggles appear to make the Russian military only more desperate.
So there's two things here. One, their original decapitation methods were limited. They were limited in its strike capability. They were limited because I think that they truly were looking to target exclusively military locations. They weren't doing the shock and awe shit that we did in Baghdad. Okay, decapitate the government, immediately put your own puppet state in a position of power. And that way, with the least amount of civilian casualties, that occupational force is less likely to fight against a much larger insurgency. Okay? Because if you start fucking bombing locations, then boom, you're in a 20-year... You start bombing everybody, all of a sudden, 20-year war, baby. You know? You're fighting against Ukrainians that look exactly like you for the rest of time. We can do that because we don't have healthcare. Not to say that like Russian healthcare is great or whatever, but you know, they're much poorer, but we can do that for 20 years because that's how our economy works. Their economy still relies on, you know, selling oil and energy and Bitcoin farmers and dashcam videos and parkour videos to the rest of the planet.
As the conflict prolonged, the invaders resorted to looting, to shelling civilian areas, to increasingly destructive weaponry, and to more deadly techniques to compensate for their lack of strategic tact. Therefore, the true cost for Russia's failure is borne on the innocent casualties of war.
And cyber crimes.
Ukrainian defenders, Russian conscripts, And perhaps most tragically, the Ukrainian civilians who were displaced, injured, or killed simply for staying in the place they called home.
Okay, now let's watch this tactical military guy.
All right, everyone, there's a 40-mile-long Russian armored convoy headed for Kiev right
Because every single person has been telling me that you have to watch this video. This guy's really good.